Welcome to Brightly You Radiant Being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. Each episode, we use our good and bad experiences, friendship, and passions to inspire thought provoking conversation and soul driven advice to better help you create a life worth living and step more brightly into yourself inch by inch.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Tracy.
How are you?
I don't know why I laughed. That's a valid question. Um, it's absolutely a valid question. I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm feeling spooky.
I listen. Oh, it's my favorite time of year.
It is
Yes, it is. It
so for me, it's primarily the weather and the sun setting earlier, as we've
yeah.
discussed in many an
It's
episode. I don't
yes.
like the sun being out. Um, do you have any other reasons?
Well, absolutely the weather, the colors all around, the changing of the season. When you go from winter to spring, it's a very messy, dirty,
Mm.
like it's an upheaval of things. When you go from summer to fall, it's just sort of a like an exhale kind of thing.
Oh, I like
That's
that.
oh, good. That's how it feels to me, at least. And it's just this magic all around is how I feel. And then, of course, because of Halloween, Samhain, I ever since I was a kid, it was my favorite.
I love how you mentioned like it just feels like a sigh because if we go by the wheel of the year and just kind of like how things kind of progress, this is a time when we've done the harvest and now we're kind of celebrating like everything dying, like we are kind of celebrating it. And so like that sigh, that beauty, that peak, and then everything kind of just like the leaves blowing in the wind, everything being bare is just kind of like the death and just like the beauty. And like we celebrated how we aged through the year, how the year aged, and now like we're getting ready to be messily reborn.
Yeah, I love that, the death. And when you think about the sigh, like that final breath, that final, because it's not,
That
I
exhale.
feel like it's the exhale, right? Yeah, that's how it just feels.
And so Halloween is also Samhain, which is a Celtic celebration, a pagan celebration. And then also the day after Halloween, and for a few more days, is Day of the Dead. And so we
Yes,
have many different cultures around the same time of year celebrating the death. And Halloween or Samhain is typically witch's new year, right? And then that November 1st is like a new year day, like it's the new
yes,
start.
yes. And I love that. When this airs, we'll have just come off of um, the lunar eclipse. And
Full
it's a
moon
full
lunar.
moon lunar eclipse. It's a partial lunar eclipse, but it's partial blood moon. It's a pretty big deal.
And it's a
It's
magical time, like you said, like energies are ripe. There are many people who believe in like a thinning of the veil and like a thinning of our
Mhm.
access to different energies and different aspects of our world. And then
Which
the
ties in
full
beautifully with Day of the Dead. If you are a person who wants to connect with your ancestors, if the veil is thin, it's going to be easier. You were going to say something about the
well,
full moon.
the full moon with the eclipse heightens those energies even more, right? So just I feel like in the time that we've done this show, like every time we've kind of marked or celebrated a holiday or there's been an eclipse, it's just been growing and growing and growing in power. And we have all of these like once in a lifetime events or once in every 400-year events that we're getting to experience. And so I love how we're trying to take advantage of those energies and kind of live with the cycle of the wheel of the year, right? Like,
Yeah. And I feel, not I feel, one of the things that we are going to be doing, that Brightly is going to be doing, because it is such a magical time of year, and because it also ties in with something that we used to do in high school. In high school, Spirit Week was that week before homecoming, that every day was kind of a different kind of day, like pajama day, 50s day.
Wild hair day.
Exactly. So, but it was to, boost school morale, and it was kind of a community thing, and it was fun. But so we did a Spirit Week last year as well, and we are going to revisit this Spirit Week this year because it is such a magical time of year. So with we will have started already when this airs, but we start with the full moon on Saturday and continue through Friday, November 3rd. So I believe is that the last celebratory day for Day of the Dead. So every day there'll be kind of a new Spirit Week activity on Instagram. And we're going to have fun with this and also come home to ourselves with this.
I was just going to say, yeah, our version of Spirit Week isn't necessarily all of us rooting for the same team. It's like,
unless it's our spirit
group
team.
There you go. I love that. It's kind of our way to use like this group energy to invest in ourselves and each other through community, through taking advantage of the energies of this time of year. So whether it's just, like you go micro and it's just you and like you treat it like New Year's and you focus on what you want to release and what you want to call in, perfect time for that. If you want to do that plus or just something else instead, we have other ways, like you said, to connect with your ancestors, to celebrate the moon, to just get in touch with the different things going on at this time of year. Because there's something to it if many, many different cultures across the world are doing the same thing without connecting to each other. It has to mean something, right? Or am I assigning meaning to something that doesn't?
I mean, that's a good question, but no, I feel that it has to mean something. I want it to mean something. Therefore, it shall mean something.
And
yeah,
that ties into actually the theme of today's episode. So last year we actually did an episode on Spirit Week, so please go and listen to that for even more ideas. But this year we're feeling superstitious.
we are very superstitious. The
And
writing's on the wall.
superstitions to me is people assigning meanings to thing that other people would logically be like, no, that's not a thing or that's not going to happen. But if you believe in it, that's not true.
Yeah.
It is real and it is going to happen.
Right. And I think the other thing that superstition is assigning meaning to something that is not understood. So where a group of people or an individual just doesn't understand something, they assign their own meaning to it or superstition around it. Something interesting, and I would, because we had been doing, a lot of episodes around myth, is the difference between superstition and myth. And I can't remember where I read it, is someone said, well, myth is based on story and superstition is just a belief. And I disagree with that. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, so if you think about common superstitions, they're common, right? And it's not it we learned them from somewhere and we typically learned it through a story. We took on a belief through a story, in my opinion. I feel like a superstition is a more stigmatized, and oftentimes people try and debunk it. It's like a stigmatized myth. I'll put it that way, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
I think
Yeah.
maybe the biggest difference between the two is there isn't a hero between the stories. And maybe that's what they're claiming as a story or not, right?
I like that. Now, that I'll buy, except I feel like the person who is experiencing the superstition is the hero.
See?
So so I think it could be both. And I feel like everything starts with story. And maybe that's just my own,
Well,
that's a story I'm telling myself. But
as humans and you know, as a being with language, stories are how we learn. Stories are
yeah.
how we remember. Stories are how we connect. And so I
Mhm.
feel like someone, you know, superstitions can be dangerous, right? Like they can prevent people from taking action. They can make people take actions that could hurt themselves or others. They can be a source of OCD, right? So something that you know, anything, you know, that's more abnormal psychology, of course, is going to depend on how much it affects your life in a negative manner, right? And I think
Right.
that's why people poo-poo superstitions and they would say, like, no, I'm not superstitious. But if you talk to them about some of their beliefs, if somebody
Yeah.
really, really thought about it, we're all probably way more superstitious than we think we are.
Well, I would agree because I think that if somebody had asked me, "Are you superstitious?" I would have said no. But then during the show notes, I was like, "Well, let's talk about our own superstitions."
Yeah,
I
what do you
mean,
got? Let's skip ahead.
obviously we do have some. And then I realized I actually do. And so one of my superstitions is if anything bad is going on, I need to see a penguin. Like, and it can't just be where I just like type in penguin and then see a penguin. It has to be someone has a penguin, there's a print of a penguin.
Oh, so you're
Um,
just not expecting to see a penguin on 35W as you're heading
right,
home, right?
right. It wasn't like my fox one where I was like, show me a fox.
You
No,
know, I would be a true believer if that were to happen. You would, I would
no,
now, I would have my own penguin religion.
yeah.
I would
So,
be scouting for
yeah.
followers.
So I truly do. I need to see a penguin. And this relates back to my son Joey and when he had cancer as a baby. And I started to see penguins. And then every clinic visit, every doctor visit for his surgery, I had to, it was like, where's the penguin? Where's the penguin? And then I'd find it, and then it would make me less anxious.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think there's a lot to do with superstitions and hope or worry about an
Ah,
outcome of a situation, and
yes.
that by this unseen force, we can affect it through our belief.
Mhm. Think about fans, sporting
Right?
fans,
Oh my gosh.
the things that they have to do.
Or not even fans, the athletes themselves. Like people won't change socks
Yeah,
to the point of infection in their
right,
bodies,
right.
thinking that that mattered. Um, there are, I mean, isn't the Silver Lining Playbook all about how superstitious his dad was and a veil of
Excelsior.
undiagnosed mental illness because he
Yes.
had such a ritual and felt so much to the point where he tried to get involved in his son's relationship with a woman because he thought she was the reason why they were losing. And she came in with facts. And she's like, well, actually, when he hung out with me, they won. And whenever you took him away from me, they lost.
And oh, by the way, the word that you use, Excelsior, is actually the word, wasn't it like for the opposing team or
Yes, yes.
something? Yeah, yeah, yeah. She totally debunked all of it.
But
But
it's
yes,
so much around hope and wanting of a
mhm,
specific outcome. And that if I
yes.
do these things or an outcome you don't want, right? So like step on a crack, break your mother's back. So I'm not going to step on any cracks. And if I do and my mom gets hurt, right? Or someone important in my
I'm
life.
just going to tell you this right now. My mother has passed, right? My mother died in 2019. I still hate stepping on a crack. I still hate it. I go out of my way to not step on the cracks. And I didn't even have that down. But and that's just like, I think that's muscle memory more than anything, but it's in there,
And
right?
yeah, and this begs the question,
Yeah.
what was the story that was told that made every single one of us, because there's obviously something there around don't step on a crack. And this is some sort of mnemonic or memory thing or something that in 2023, you would think it's okay. Our infrastructure's sound enough 90% of the time I can step on a crack. But whenever this came about, there was probably cracks in something. And it was important to remember
Yeah, because
that it
you
was
probably would
dangerous.
fall through or
Yeah.
something.
But like,
But
because I
I
would
don't
think
know.
everybody's heard of that. And at some point,
I
maybe they're
wonder
not
if I've
avoiding
got
their
it.
entire life, but if they
Yeah,
are just on a walk alone on a sidewalk and they go, oh, I'm gonna see how many paces I can go without stepping on a crack, right? Like,
I know. I'm going to see if it's in here.
do you have a book?
I do.
You have a book on superstitions?
I do.
Boy, do I
That
not
I
prepare
do.
enough for episodes like I thought I
Um,
did.
but I'm gonna set this down because I need both hands and I'm gonna look that up. And then
What?
I do have another, I don't know if it's a superstition or I just think it'll bring good luck, is that you have to eat something round. So your treat on your birthday needs to be round, whether it's a cake, a pie, it
So,
has to be round.
Amy, when I read the show notes last week, my stomach dropped when I read that.
Oh,
Her show notes, her outline just says must have round tree and actual day of birthday. And my stomach dropped. And I was like, did I do that? Like this wasn't even my superstition. I've never heard of it before. And all of a sudden, everything in me, hair stands up on end. Did we? And then I just breathed a sigh of release, that autumn exhale, when I was like, oh, you put a candle in a macaron this year. You're good. And I was like, you know
it's
what?
not
That's actually, it's a cute superstition. And it's one, I don't know where you got it, but I might pass it on now. Because it's harmless, right? And it's something, it gives meaning to something we do with like a round birthday cake, right?
right. Right. I actually got it from a book. It was The Truth About Unicorns by Bonnie Jones Reynolds that I read a million years ago, and it's out of print. And
So it's nonfiction.
I love it. I love it. What are some of yours?
um, well, I peeked at the show note and I saw you were gonna ask me. And I was
Yeah.
like, knowing me, I probably do. But you know where I had to go? I went to Chat GPT and I was like, hey, give me 20 common superstitions. And
Yeah.
like you can watch as it types, and I'm like, yep, 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 yep.
So you had to see them first in order
I
to be reminded that you actually had them.
So I would never say I'm broadly superstitious, but I do believe some things have meaning and our intent matters, and that we may be able to affect an outcome through being thoughtful and intentional in our actions. And a lot of
Yeah.
these superstitions, like I've mentioned before, are kind of tying that intent to the outcome
Yeah.
you want. So one, it wasn't on there, but I must be a really annoying person to date because people love would you rather questions as like dinner discussion questions. I had a
Yeah.
friend who tried to bring this up every dinner. I will not. And especially like if it's two terrible, horrible things that would never occur and you would never want them to occur, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
calling that in. I'm not picking one or the other. I'm saying
Oh,
no.
okay. Oh, I love it that you don't want to do it because you don't want to call it in.
No, no,
I
no,
never
ma'am.
thought of that. It's just irritating to me because it's irritating.
Yes,
I
and they're
never
just
thought about
irritating,
that.
right? And so like some people just like to get like so gross and disgusting with it. And I was like, if if the question itself makes me tense up, makes shivers go up my spines, why would I answer it? Like, why would I answer a hypothetical? No, I'm going to say things I do want into this world, and I'm going to do what we talked about in the last episode, and thank you more, please. And so that has to be a superstition, right? That I just flat out, I won't play a game. I won't do it. I will be the Debbie Downer at the table. And
Well,
I
I
don't even
think
want
the
to listen to other people.
the superstition is that you'll call it into you,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
Then so one that I don't believe but is common is black cats. I think they're good luck. I think witches back in the day got a bad rap. I
Yeah.
heard recently that women were called witches and women became cat ladies, or witches became cat ladies, because during the plague, women who owned cats were not dying of the plague. It was because we now know fleas on mice carried the plague, and what gets rid of mice? Cats. So here, just women with cats got lucky, right? Or intentionally were cleanlier than others and were branded crazy ladies. And then their cats became mystical beings as well by the people who were suddenly afraid of these
Mhm.
people who weren't dying. And so I
Mhm.
actually believe black cats are good luck. All cats are good luck, but black cats aren't inherently bad. And it makes me really sad when I learned years ago that black cats shelters won't adopt them out around certain times of the year for fear that people are going to intentionally be cruel to them. That black
Oh
cats
my
that
goodness.
there are people that actively pursue harm on black cats during Friday the 13th or Halloween. That's how pervasive that superstition has been. And I I like seeing in the newer medias and shows and stuff like that, they're calling out or bringing attention to the stuff I just brought. And so I think Hollywood is semi-aware of itself and is trying not to perpetuate that stereotype. Um, but yeah, there's some stereotypes and some superstitions like I talked about. Uh-oh, my Google just rebooted. I don't know if I have my list. There's one that you had. Oh, here it is. There's one that you had that you do, and I think you shouldn't do that, Amy.
Is that my intentional one? Because I'm like, don't tell me what to do. I will walk underneath this ladder.
And I just feel like superstition or not, it's just common sense. Don't walk under someone's ladder.
No,
That
I
seems
know.
dangerous for
It's,
everybody on board. And I
oh
hope
no,
that
it would, no, no, I would never walk under someone else's ladder. I mean, if I've put a ladder up and then I'm just like, that's the shortest distance is underneath it.
and that's something
Yes.
to me that again my gut dropped when I read it. I was like, "Oh, no, you don't walk under ladders." Like young Tracy was impressed upon at a young age. That and Amy, the debate I have about opening umbrellas indoors and what classifies as indoors. Like a
So
mall
funny.
on your way out in a vestibule, that doesn't count to me. Your office, that doesn't count. Your home, don't you open an umbrella in your home, Tracy Lynn? I just
I would say I try not to do that either. And then the only time I have an open umbrella inside is if it's so wet and my entry, I don't have like a little nook entry, like I
yeah.
can't dry it any other place. I need to dry it. So
So in
if I
that
have to
case,
bring it in, then
I
go
bring
down to the laundry room and
oh,
then I open it in the laundry room.
so I bring an open umbrella into my home at that point.
Yes.
I don't open it in the home.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah.
Right. I don't either. So
Oh,
it
yeah.
is open.
Is that
And then
because of the superstition that you don't open it in the home?
I think that it's just that's one of those things that's just been ingrained in me. It feels like it's more than superstition for some reason. In my head, it's like it's good form. You just don't
I
open an umbrella in your home or anyone else's.
I feel like there's just like some old timey parent way back in the day that is just like an open umbrella in a house is just cumbersome. You're gonna hurt someone. It's gonna either get water everywhere. It's gonna break something. They're huge. What do you do with it? Where do you put it? Like you just said, you have to have a laundry room. And so I fully believed it was just parents back in the 1700s being like, "Get that out of my house. You're bringing bad luck on the family."
So this is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. But when I worked at Oxborough Library, we had a wheelchair available for people who needed it, and it wasn't folded up and
Yeah,
behind the desk. We didn't have room for it. It was just out by the entryway. Now it wasn't in the lobby; it was right after you walked into the library. And of course, every single middle schooler who walked in, and there were many, legion, who walked into that library would want to sit in the wheelchair and goof around in it. And
yeah.
finally, I go, that's bad luck, right?
I totally would have done the same thing.
And they looked at me and I was like, oh yeah, you're able-bodied and you're playing around in a wheelchair. That's bad luck. You're asking
You're
to
bringing
have to be
juju, yeah.
to be in a wheelchair.
And Amy, as a witch, you made it so.
Oh yeah. No, that did it. They were like, oh. And then I think they told their friends.
Yeah. Well, and then it also, whether or not they believe in the bad luck, it points out again the obvious. It's unsafe to walk under a ladder. You don't know if someone's up there, what's going on. It could be potentially hazardous to open an umbrella in a small space.
Yes.
And being an able bodied person and using something meant for someone who needs it is just bad form, right? Like,
It
so a
is
lot of
bad
these
form.
things, again,
Mhm.
I don't know. But then
Yeah.
there's other things like what's on Witch Talk right now. Like, I don't walk into fairy rings now, which I fully believe before I found out about them on the internet. So, a fairy ring is when out of the blue, as mushrooms do, mushrooms just appear. But occasionally, mushrooms will appear in a perfect circle
Yeah.
with nothing but grass in the center of them. Don't walk in the middle of that.
Okay, so Tracy, my stomach fell when I read that one because I was like, oh shit. Because I'm like, the minute I see one of those rings, I'm like, into the middle I go. So why aren't
Pre-pandemic,
you?
pre-TikTok, Tracy would have been like, "What's this portal?" And now I'm like, "Ooh, that's a trap."
So it's a trap. That's what they're saying.
I don't. It depends. There's some. This is there's a separate episode on fairies where I need to read a book. But
Ah,
there's some people who believe like don't tell the fae your name, don't call them in, that they might have nefarious purposes or whatever.
mhm.
There are different like portals and things like that. I'm wondering, you and I, and with what we believe, if it's just a call home, right? Where it's just a natural inclination to be like, oh yeah, I belong there, and not just a dangerous curiosity. Get us
So
some trouble.
I feel like for me, the story that I could tell myself is that's their fairy ring, and I don't need to disturb it, but I can look at it and acknowledge it and like it.
And that's where I feel like the superstition came from, is the actual fae who walk around our world with us. They're like, stupid humans, get out of my door. Like, you're
Right?
in my way. That is mine. That is not for you. You're going to ruin
Yeah.
it. Go away. And
They
so now we
probably
have,
are like the Fae have a superstition. If a human is in your doorway, that's bad luck for 70,000 years.
and then the one it was one I think it was the third one on Chat GPT where it's like, oh yep, I'm superstitious. This, like, the first two is like, oh yep, ladders, yep, cats, oh okay, yep, I'm a superstitious person. I knock on wood.
I
I
knock on wood
literally
all the
knock on,
time.
who doesn't knock on wood? It is ingrained. We watch our grandmas do it,
Ingrained.
everybody does it. But it's one of those things where I didn't realize it, but that's a pagan witchy thing.
Yes, it
That's
is
where its foundation
because,
comes.
yes, because thought that spirits, or either that the tree was alive or that spirits lived in the tree. And so that is where that came from as well. I knew we'd have so much to talk about on superstitions. One of my actual favorite ones, we just had a Friday the 13th, and it is always interesting to me that people are scared of Friday the 13th or 13 as a number. And I actually think part of that is the patriarchy, is
Amy,
the
it's
dominance
there's
of.
some buildings that don't have a 13th
Oh
floor.
no, there's many buildings that don't have a 13th floor. There's some airlines that don't have a 13th row. There are many things that don't have 13. And the superstition is there's a few different things. It's like Judas was the 13th guest at the Last Supper. Loki was the 13th guest at some dinner party, and then he wrecked the world. And then allegedly Eve offered Adam the apple on a Friday, and Friday's also the hangman's day. But 13 was always actually known as a mystical feminine number. Um, it's a goddess. Day of the goddess was Friday the 13th, literally
Yeah.
day of the goddess, Freya's day. And then it's basically a day to worship the divine feminine in everyone. 13 moon cycles, 13 menstrual cycles. uh
And let's be honest, if Ms. Taylor Swift herself has been inscribing the number 13 on her hand since she was a child,
yeah.
and she is has been obsessed with number 13. It might be her date of birth, but still. look at her success in the world, right? Like,
Yeah.
she has a thing for numerology, she has a thing for astrology, she's a
Mhm.
deep believer in a lot of things, and like look at how she has done in the world. That's a new superstition of mine, is 13 is lucky. I've
Oh,
thought that
I
for a while
absolutely,
now.
yes. And
Um
didn't you, I mean, for such a long time, I'm always excited for a Friday the 13th. I'm
yeah.
just so excited.
I
Yeah.
I just like days that mean things in general. Any holiday today, while we're recording this, as you know, I found out this morning, October 27th, Friday, October 27th, is National Black Cat Day. And I just told Amy the universe is flirting with you because it's the day we're recording an episode on superstitions. But
Love
yeah, so
it.
it's just
National Black Cat Day.
like October 13th, it's just something, it's a date that kind of means something to everybody in a weird way, whether you ignore it, believe in it, or celebrate it, right?
Yeah.
For me, I it's funny you mentioned airlines. Today I booked tickets for next year for something, and both my departure and arrival flights, I'm in seat 13C, excitedly so.
I love it.
That they were
Excitedly
trying to, someone else
so.
was like, "Oh, this one's a little," and I was like, "I want that one." I want the same one I had. Like the first time, it was just like the default, the best option or whatever, and then the second time they're like, "We could move you up," and I'm like, "No, I'll forget. Let's keep it the same. Let's balance it out." When really in my head, I'm like, "I want 13. It's a
See,
lucky
see,
seat."
it is, and I think 13 is like it's not a master number in numerology, but it is the divine feminine number in numerology. It is actually that. I think that we talked about this a little bit. Sometimes superstitions can help us feel like we
Yes.
have more control over the world and the unknown, but also to your point that, when we were talking about, they can also debilitate us.
Yeah.
And so I think it's one thing to have kind of some fun with superstitions, and then it's another thing completely. I'm looking around because I just realized I forgot my tarot cards, so
Well,
just,
and so that's one thing for sure though.
yeah.
Like if I needed to walk under a ladder, I could, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the difference between something debilitating you in your life and mental health wise and things like that, and whether or not you need to step on a crack. Could you do it? Could you walk under a ladder? Could you be near a black cat? And I think most of us can. It's just kind of the fun and like that immediate thought we have when the opportunity presents itself, right? Like when I have a wet umbrella and I can't leave it outside, I think in my head, "Uh-oh." But as long as I don't stew on the, "Oh, I just gave myself bad luck," right? Like if something were to happen that night or if I were to get into a fender bender the next day, I probably wouldn't attribute it to that seriously. I might jokingly say it. Like I've been talking a lot about something I have upcoming in my life, and my boss and I have been making some jokes around whether or not I'll come back, or like, "Oh, if you you better make it." And then even though I know we're joking, I find myself knocking on some just just like
Right.
not even thinking about
Just
it.
in
But
case. Yeah.
I also, like, let's say wood wasn't around me, I wouldn't be in a panic, right? Like that's the thing about, is it a superstition or is it something that's impacting my life in a negative way? So
Yeah.
keep that in
Really
mind
good
as you're
point.
kind of reflecting on your own superstitions. And I just encourage everybody to challenge why you have it. Is it yours? And like the black cat thing, the number 13 thing, like all these things that we've kind of turned around. Did
Mhm.
you ever find out, did your book show you
No,
anything on the
no, it didn't. But I
Okay,
tell you what, I'm going to look that up and I'll add it to
perfect.
something.
I love
Yeah,
that. Well,
I am
speaking
going
of
to.
like the divine and
Yeah.
connecting and things that have greater meaning, we now do our tarot pulls on the show, but we just pull the card. If you want to find out how it relates or even what the card means, Amy does a reading on our Instagram.
Yes, I pulled the Five of Swords.
Ooh.
I know. I think that, and this deck, if you're not on YouTube, this is the Wild Unknown, and it depicts,
A
well,
sidewalk crack. I can't actually see it, so I don't know.
it's almost like it's a worm or a snake that's been cut in half, and then there are five swords on the card. I have a lot to say about that on Reels
I also
next week.
wonder if there's any superstitions around worms or swords now. Or the number 5. Oh, there's a lot of people that believe
Oh,
in
there's
only doing things in fives.
yeah, there'll be a lot with this. Absolutely.
Ugh. Okay, I love it. And if you did too, please share it with a friend. And if you have time, give us some love on your preferred platform with a rate, review, and subscribe. And then, like I said earlier, you can reach out to us on Instagram and YouTube under The Brightly Podcast or email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com. And if you're listening as we post it the week of all Halloween and Samhain and Day of the Dead and all that, join us for Spirit Week. And if you're listening after, go back in time. The post will still be there, and whatever resonates or feels good, these are things you can do all the time. Energy will follow you where you need to go. That's my superstition. That's my belief.
And with that, we hope you have a bright and beautiful and spirity day.
Bye.
Bye.